everyone. Brian here, and welcome back to another episode of our Smart Hustle PH podcast. We all have dreams, right? We all want something more. And by that, I mean in many good ways, okay? Most of us, if not all, have ambitions. Any normal human being has ambitions. But there's one thing that consistently freezes people in their tracks. And I, for one, have been in that same position or in that same stead at some point. That is the fear, of making the wrong decision. And what do I mean by that? Now, we wait for the perfect sign. And have you heard of someone saying, okay, I'll just wait for that right moment, for the perfect sign, the perfect moment, the perfect guarantee? We all want a guarantee of some sort, right? And I totally understand that. Naturally, our brains are wired to making decisions that protect us from any mishap or, any wrong outcome. And today I'd like to talk about pivoting from that mindset of fear. Talking about fear, I want us to internalize this core truth, and it's something that James Clear helps me understand. And it goes something like, whether a decision is good or bad can change based on how you act after the choice is made. All right? Again, let me repeat that. Whether a decision is good or bad can change based on how you act after the choice is made. So think about it. It's not just about, finding the perfect starting line. It's about how you run the race. But of course, let's be clear, kahit sinong tao, any normal human being, any normal person, making deliberate choices on the get-go is absolutely crucial, especially when it comes to major life decisions like maybe marriage, college, choosing what course to take up, maybe choosing a career or starting a business. We must factor in careful planning. And that's normal. That's how it should be. Mahalaga ang pagpaplano. And we brain dump to make a plan as perfect as it can be to what? To yield good or even great results. We want that. Yun nga lang na that initial perfect choice is never a definite guarantee for long-term success. So the question is, how do we act after the decision or choice is made? All right. Number one would be, you cannot learn all the lessons beforehand. You cannot learn all the lessons beforehand. Maybe, like I said, talking about marriage, for example, you discover what truly works in a marriage and how to compromise, not during the engagement or, during dating, but after saying, I do, during the ceremony or after saying, I do. So you realize after moving in together that your spouse, or your wife or your husband's resourcefulness with money, for example, is different from yours. No? Merong kanya-kanyang diskarte. Yung isa, syempre, kuripot. And yung isa naman, medyo galante. All right? So, here's the dating phase, right? Before that, there's a dating phase, and all that is about, mostly it's about killing. Usually, it's about the thrill, the excitement. There's no financial commitments just yet. Just hanging out, just going out on dates, just putting your best foot forward kasi nga kailangan mong magpa-impress, And so here comes the engagement phase. Now, this is maybe when you start to plan out a course of action as to how things would agreeably work for both you and your partner or your fiancé when you get married. And still, you're in that killing, moments. You still have that killing moments or the thrill. All right. But here comes the married life, the marriage part, the married life phase. It's about learning to combine your finances and setting mutual rules or compromises, like maybe agreeing on a budget for padala, or I'd like to call this a family support kung meron man, and you're still giving out, a small or a portion of your income to maybe your parents or your siblings if you still have siblings who go to school. All right, maybe some responsibility, falls under, you, for example, or maybe, for household expenses, sino yung magbabayad ng bill ng kuryente? Who pays the electricity bills, the water bill, internet, and whatnot, whatever that is. So this is not something you get to learn at school. Well, there can be counseling of some sort. There's pastoral counseling, there's family planning, etc., and whatnot, and those are great. But you don't make conscious compromises before it or before marriage, right? Now, talking about career, I'd say you can only figure out what type of career you genuinely enjoy after doing the actual work. So it may not necessarily apply to all jobs, right? Maybe you only discovered your true niche after trying and failing at sales, maybe, or cold calling and emailing. So you landed a great VA or virtual assistance job, handling calls and emails, and client onboarding kasi malaki ang sahod, for example. Maybe, I don't know. But you quickly realize na ayaw mo talaga ng sales pressure. Like me, I've tried sales before. I've sold some stuff. I've been a tech support plus sales rep. But I realize I'm not really into super sales. Well, I run a business, but I'm not really doing hard selling or any stuff like that. Okay. But you find out for example, you actually enjoy creating the graphics maybe and writing the social media captions. So the solution is not quitting. It's more of like shifting your focus and negotiating for a role in, let's say, content creation. Proving that your healing or your interests or your passions align with your job. All right, well, maybe talking about business, but maybe that business idea that, you felt flawless on paper, you made a business plan. Making that, like I said, business plan from ideation to execution, designing, sourcing out supplies, maybe costing, there's pricing, there's delivery and logistics, the location, that's very important, right? If it's a brick and mortar type of business, and everything in between. So talking about business, you only learn maybe that the location was wrong or the packaging was not good enough after you open a store. You start getting people to come in and buy your stuff and see the market reaction. All right, so you launch maybe, just for example, maybe you launched a trendy online ube dessert shop. Akala mo solid na dahil sikat ang ube, especially to Filipinos, But thing is, you realize or you found out later that sales are slow because the packaging is too simple and doesn't look good for Instagram. Walang wow factor. Hindi siya Instagrammable. So, and that's when you start to improvise, So the success action is immediately, iterating. Hiring a student graphic designer for better labels, making that dessert maybe visually more appealing, and just pivoting to food delivery maybe, or food delivery apps, instead of relying on just walk-in customers. You improvise. So that quick strategy, or I'd like to call it resourcefulness rather, or discarte in Filipino, right? That quick discarte just might save the business. So the point being is, in nearly every area of life, what you wish you knew ahead of time can only be learned after the decision is made. And that realization is key. At habang mas nagiging aware tayo at hindi naman pala kailangan na, it doesn't need to be perfect right away o magaling ka na kaagad. it is liberating. Mas nagiging malaya tayo. We become, we have that sense of freedom. Free from what? It frees us from the pressure of flawless planning and execution. So if there is no perfect plan or perfect decision or perfect execution, the question is, what do we do? Right? So I'd like to call this, committing to making the decision right after the fact. All right. So the question next is, how do we do that? That comes point number 2, and that is to pay attention to what you like. So this goes back to our episode on wants versus likes. All right. I have one episode called Wants versus Likes. So feel free to check that episode out. I'm just adding it somewhere in this video and maybe in the description below. So talking about that, the question is, does the result of this decision, no matter how messy the process, give you that satisfaction? Does it align with your values? Is it something that you like doing? Is it making you happy? So let that feeling of fulfillment guide you towards becoming the person you want to become. You must accept the inevitable mess. No, again, I also have that episode. I'm linking the episode in this video as well. It's called Things Are Messy Before They Are Perfect. I know, just to segue, I know Filipino culture, values deep loyalty. We have this, loyalty or bond. Lalo na kapag kasama ang pamilya, when you're with your family, your friends, barkada or your peers na nagiging business partners mo. So think about the think about the tension when you start a business with a family member or a close friend, for example. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong or it's bad, no, na makipag-partner sa mga kaibigan o kapamilya. It could be something that you like, and it could be a good decision, or probably not. Another virtual mentor of mine always talks about financial boundaries and knowing the difference between family and friendships in the business, right? Or in business per se. So his advice goes something like, it focuses on addressing the emotional and relational aspects of money management, particularly saying no to protect your finances from being drained or being abused by others, especially or even family members and friends. With that said, learning to say no, here's the thing. Learning to say no, that good decision wasn't the emotional partnership. It may have been the courage she showed afterward, to set clear contracts and maybe boundaries that save both the venture, the business, and the friendship or the relationship. So again, pay attention to what you like, just with extra caution. Kasi nga, things are messy before they are perfect or they become great. All right. And this leads us to point number 3. That is to commit to making the most of each opportunity. Commit to making the most of it. This is where the hustle comes in. When things get tough, and it will get tough, you iterate. Now, we don't have to be perfect, but we have to be present and committed. So, question is, what do we do when things get tough? You improvise. You adapt. Now, another virtual mentor of mine, he said something like, if you want to be, it's almost like it's a cliche already. So if you want to be successful, step out of your comfort zone. We've heard this many, many times, a lot of times from different people. All right. So maybe that initial decision may be good. The messy part is when things get tough and is part of the process. But then again, when a decision is good or bad, remember from the start we talked about this, we mentioned this, whether a decision is good or bad can change based on how you act after the choice is made. So for me, and maybe for some of you out there, the success is the learning and adaptation that happens next or in between. So let's put it this way. Think online food business, just for example. You launch with a few dishes, right? But the first week, walang umorder. So instead of quitting, which is the easy route, you immediately adapt. What do? You improve your food photos maybe to make it look more, Instagrammable. Maybe you try a promo, maybe a buy one, get one promo. Yes, magsusunog ka muna ng pera, especially from the start, but it's an investment for the long term as you go. Or you personally message, potential customers, which is what you call the warm marketing approach. So the point is that ability to quickly, pivot, that's the real win. So you commit to making the most of the opportunity, not just the original idea. Again, there's no perfect decision. Good decisions are made right after the fact. Ngayon, gawin mo na ang decision mo. Do the most out of whatever decision you may have, made at this point. At gawin mo ito na may panindigan. That commitment to making the most of each opportunity. And to sum it all up, 3 key takeaways from this episode. Number 1 is you cannot learn all the lessons beforehand. That's number 1. Number 2 is pay attention to what you like. And number 3 is commit to making the most of each opportunity. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you for joining me today. If this episode resonated with you, please share it in your maybe stories or to someone you think this episode can be of any help. And don't forget to follow Smart Hustle PH on all our socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once again, my name is Brian. Until next time, keep hustling smart and keep making those decisions right. I'll see you in the next one.